exciting. I became a job post expert by accident. And Dave started to mention that, but on a conference just like this, I offered to write job postings for free. And do you know what happened next? About 600 people contacted me in 30 minutes. Courtney knows the story. That's why she's laughing.
I do. Absolutely.
I legitimately wrote all of them. And it was an indoctrination that I didn't necessarily want, but it was the best lesson in becoming a job post writing expert that I could possibly have, because job postings are the currency of recruiting. Literally, we should not, let me asterisk this, we should not be hiring or firing if we do not have a job in hand. If we don't have someone's story in hand, because job postings are so much more than we give them credit, right? They are literally the story of someone's whole life. Work is not a little thing. We don't make those decisions lightly. And so today we're going to talk about taking on job postings. And what I love about this session is that Dave has given us a chance, instead of having me lecture you this whole time and tell you all about how to and what to click, he actually gave me 2 hours. So we're going to do the how to and what to click next. But first, I get to introduce you to one of my favorite people in this industry.
Oh,
I mean that. I'm not kissing your buddy there just because we're on stage, but
okay.
maybe a little. No, of all the people I've worked with, Courtney is one of the people who truly centers the human in human resources. She puts people first in a way that I think touches right to my heart, and it makes me believe that we can be better. It makes me believe that we can be more. And you've done incredible things throughout your career, running, hiring, HR, and everything in between for some huge restaurants that all of you have definitely eaten at before. And today we're going to talk about one of those projects and some of the work that Courtney and I have done together. And so I just want to welcome you and say thank you so much for being here, Courtney.
Well, I appreciate it. And you are also one of my favorite people, and I will Venmo you after this session is over for all of your kind words. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because, our friendship was not the start of this whole conversation about job postings. You called me because you knew something was off.
Absolutely.
With those job postings. Can you kind of set the stage for everyone else? I was in the convo, but they missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason that I reached out to Katrina was, one, I had heard her voice, her opinions, just kind of following her on social media and kind of slowly falling in love with what she was doing. And essentially what we were finding as I was the VP of HR and talent for Hula Hands Restaurants, which is a national restaurant chain, predominantly in the Midwest and in the East Coast. And we actually at one point had 6 brands, but we were focusing primarily under the Hula Hands umbrella, which is a casual dining concept. And 65 locations, 4,500 employees, most of them non-exempt. We were really trying to understand what was the problem with how we could not retain the people that we really wanted. We could potentially get them if they were related to someone else that we knew, because we had a lot of tenure there. We had families coming through, which was awesome. But in terms of a new, almost like a guest acquisition, a new candidate acquisition, we were really struggling. And we were really trying to figure out how to tell a story. And I have always come from a perspective of, I want to relate to that job posting. I want to relate to that job. I want to know that I could actually do it. I don't want to be intimidated by it. And that was one of the opportunities. And so I reached out to Katrina and said, please help me. I need some guidance on here. I need some real talk. I need to understand exactly what people are saying. So that I can deal with it, good or bad. I needed to understand what that looks like. And so that's kind of how we kicked off our conversation, and shenanigans incurred after that, but it was fun.
Well, and I think that anyone listening here understands that over 60 locations in a restaurant environment is a lot of jobs. Can you give some context on scale as far as how much hiring is happening when you're covering 60 locations?
Yeah, so in the restaurant industry, there is a standard of turnover. It's unfortunate, but it's what it is. Sometimes it's really good turnover. Sometimes I'm a means to an end as an employer standpoint. I'm getting somebody through their first swing at college. I'm getting somebody. I have teachers who work during the summer, so there is some good turnover there. But predominantly, there is also some turnover of people just trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives, and we are a stop along the way. And hopefully I like to make that the best damn job they've ever had. But sometimes that turnover happens where people just make that choice and self-select out. So therefore we're always hiring. And I say that with a cringe as a recruiter, like, oh, that sounds kind of like we're always churning people through, but we're really trying to understand it. And when you put it in perspective, between 60 and 120 people could work in a restaurant at any one time. So you have a lot of bodies who are moving through life and they are using us in their way, in their own way. And so, yeah, you're absolutely probably going to hit a turnover probably between, the groups that we were supporting, that I was supporting, we ranged anywhere from 65% hourly turnover, sometimes to north of 100, 150, depending on locations. And some of that, again, was totally rational. And some of it was like, we weren't hitting the mark. We were really doing some things that we thought made sense to us, but didn't make sense to a 16, 17, 19, 21-year-old who really wanted to find something good. And so the scope of that was, if you take that by 65 locations, I was probably hiring about 4,000 people every year, if you think about it, by 100% turnover, if you just across the averages. Sometimes it'd be less than that. Sometimes it'd probably be maybe 2,100 hourly employees, but for the most part, it was right around there. So it's a chunk of work for sure, for both our hourlies and also for our operators to go through that process. We want to make it as streamlined as possible. We want to make it as attractive as possible. And again, that's why we needed to call out the experts to help us do that.
Right. Well, and I appreciate you described that scope, because I know that often when people come to me and they say, well, but people are different in this location.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, but the job is different. Absolutely. It's a little different everywhere. So what we did to overcome some of that first was by selecting the right people to talk to in the first place.
Absolutely.
Something that I feel strongly about is that you should never, ever write about work without talking to someone who has done the job or the person who makes the decision about the hire.
Sure.
And so when I came to you and I said, okay, who are we going to talk to? What were you thinking about, or what criteria did you have in mind for a good interview or someone that we should talk to about work?
Well, let me back up for a second. So when you came and said, I want to talk to your people, I'll be honest, it was more of a surprise than anything else, because typically I was like, okay, this is what we do. Here's what it is. Here's what it is for an exempt employee. Here's what it is for a non-exempt employee. I was churning through in my brain, thinking about how I tell a story, but that was from my perspective. And so what I really loved was when you kind of challenged me and you said, I want to talk to your people. I want to talk to those people. Now, as a leader of the HR function, I'm like, yeah, I love that. I'm all excited about that. But my question then was, well, who the heck do I give you, right? Do I give you the people who have been here for 1,000 years, who know the job like the back of their hand, who have great stories, like excellent stories? Or is the magic in the people who have been there for at least 18 months, who have now fallen in love with the brand and had made a recent decision on why they wanted to stay with us? And so I thought was really interesting was when you challenged me on across not only tenure and job role, but also what those people's stories might be. And that was really great. So I think that was eye-opening for me when we did that. And I think ultimately then we really looked at the people who not only were top performers, but also people who, again, were relatively new, not necessarily bad people, but people who were still learning the job. And so why they were attracted to the job, why did they click apply? Why did they go through our application process? And what in their process of onboarding, from the minute they see the job application or the job posting to when they make a choice to apply, what part of that resonated with them? And that was the data, that was the good storytelling that we got from you guys. It was fantastic. It was eye-opening for sure.
Well, and I think especially when you're struggling with an issue like tenure, and we don't want to inject bias by saying, oh, this person does this, right, and say we only interviewed tenure. I think it was important to see it from every angle.
Absolutely.
And find the thing they all had in common.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing that they would all say, no. And the question I always ask, and the one that I think we actually got the most intel about when it came to the restaurant was, what would you tell your best friend about this job? Because there's something about restaurants that you can picture yourself in that moment. You can put yourself in that bar stool and you can imagine saying it to the person next to you.
No doubt.
And it was fascinating me how those trends rose to the top.
Yes. That was interesting. I think, again, you take it for granted when you're in the restaurant industry, as long as someone like me has been, and I have peers who have been, in their whole lives, and you take it for granted what people are going to say, what people typically respond to. You take your engagement survey feedback and you say that's clearly what the recruitment side of things is reflecting as well. But you're wrong. You are well, you're not entirely wrong. You could be partially wrong. I was wrong. I was thinking that those people who were highly engaged were the people that were going to give me a really great recruiting message to use. And candidly, that wasn't always the case. And so those verbatims, those stories that you brought to us were, again, eye-opening. I shared them with anybody who would look at them from the leadership perspective, because I really wanted to tout how great some of the verbatims were, but I also wanted us to be really upfront and honest with ourselves that we had some work to do.
Yeah. Well, and I love that too, because I think that teaches leadership that job postings are the story of someone's life.
Absolutely.
And I started to touch that at the beginning, but I think we don't give them enough credit, right? I would love anyone who's watching, put it into the chat. Have you been trained by someone besides me to write a job posting before? Just say yes if you have, or no if you have not. Because often in groups like this, we're talking and no one has ever been taught how to write one. And so we start with so many assumptions about how it should be. And leadership has the same stuff we do.
Absolutely.
Right? It happens over and over again.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to restaurants, how important do you think it is that you tell a unique story, not just another story? Because that was another issue that you and I ran into, right?
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
both had that.
Yeah. I think, so when my motto essentially is, I challenge every person to work in a restaurant for a year. I think the world would be nicer. I think the world would have more patience with each other. And I think you really do understand how people deal with each other and from a relationship dynamic or just kind of as a team. And one of the things that we really were looking for was kind of understanding why people were interested in working for us in the first place. Granted, the people who worked for us for 20, 25 years, who were amazing people, they were committed and their stories mattered, absolutely. But that necessarily wasn't going to resonate with someone who was 16, 17, first new job, or candidly, a brand new manager who was trying to break into a career, and that wasn't going to resonate with them either. And so we really had to start telling stories that really were helpful to identify with people, told real stories, not the kind of the rainbow diversity kind of photos that you see, right, that make people feel good. That's not what people respond to necessarily. People respond to, that person looks like me, that person acts like me, that person could be somebody I could deal with or not deal with, but I understand that. That's why we embraced all of our collateral to have full-on tattooed sleeves of bartenders. We wanted to engage with people who had bakery passions. We wanted to show and tell their stories, but we just needed a right way to do that. And so I think that's how we started the process, was figuring out what stories to tell and figuring out what resonated with people. And then we just went after it.
Oh yeah. And it was so fun because your marketing had such a unique.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you give some examples of like the coasters and the off-brand? I mean, I've seen them from your storage closet before, and they're hilarious.
Yes. Oh yes. So if you aren't familiar, Houlihan's has a very unique voice as a brand. Very irreverent, not inappropriate, but irreverent, snarky, kind of funny. One of the biggest pieces of collateral that we have ever used and continue to use to this day are coasters. And they are coasters that people collect every time they're here in a location. There are coasters that make it on Instagram. There's a whole, hashtag that, if you're there, you're taking pictures of coasters, and they can be really funny. They can be very current day. But to put it in perspective, we print those about 500,000 at a time. So it's not like it's a small amount when you commit to what saying on the coaster is. So we really had to make sure in our marketing group, I have to put this out there, fantastic partners, which I know is not the case for everybody. Sometimes I think you really have to build that relationship first before you do anything else, not just employment branding, but even just recruitment in general. I think you really have to get marketing to understand what you're doing. And so once we kind of broke into the idea that we could use their same tools, but for recruiting, because it's not my quote, it's from a woman named Amanda Height. And if you don't know her, she's amazing. You should have to go find her. But we used to talk about that recruiting was the crystal ball for marketing, and marketing was the crystal ball for recruiting. And so what guests are doing is the same thing what candidates would want to be doing, how they want to be talked to, how they want to feel like they're of value, how they want to take their time is valuable while they're with us, whether if they're in a booth or working. And so as we got marketing to get on board with that, which was not hard at all, I was very lucky in that regard. We started to really figure out some of that collateral we could use that marketing was also using, but that we really wanted to break into jail with as well. So we asked for a coaster. We said, out of the 4 coasters that you print at $500,000 a rip, or $500,000 a rip, you give me one? And they were like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So the coasters are, I mean, there's the ones that come to mind are some of my favorites. Like, I gave into peer pressure. Hi, my name is Kevin. I'll be your coaster this evening. Drinks on me, things like that, right? So funny, quirky things. And so we actually partnered with our team, which we're lucky enough to have a creative in-house team that is amazing. And they came up with, this is my job, you can't have it. And the coaster, that was what it said. At the bottom, it had a text to apply code that said to apply here. And so we immediately had passive eyeballs who were already brand fans of us sitting in a booth waiting for their food, and they only had that to look at. And so that quickly caught on with lots of people in terms of bringing it in, asking if they could apply. They were bringing the coaster to the manager on duty. They were taking pictures of it and sending it in. We just had really great response to that. A couple of other ones that were a little bit probably left to center, if you will, and probably can get away with in a restaurant perspective, is we put window clings on all the mirrors in all the restrooms. And we said, you're amazing at washing your hands. Why don't you get paid for it? And put the text to apply button at the bottom there so that they could immediately, as soon as they were done washing their hands, they could quickly apply within the restaurant. We did a couple of on the front doors as well, which, it depends on what you're looking for. Sometimes people love that and people don't, but it did work for us. It did work for us, and it said, you're back again, you might as well work here. So we just kind of worked through the voice of the brand and really resonated with people. I think that we got some great response from those types of things. Absolutely.
Well, I think that's an incredible illustration of what the last group was saying about how onboarding is really this long experience,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't start just because you got hired. You said something to me earlier this week, and I think we were both trying to figure out who the quote was, who we could attribute it to. But you said, the employee experience will never exceed, or the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience.
Absolutely. And I will say that comes across whether you see it in an exit interview, whether you see it in a guest survey, whether or not you see it in an engagement survey, you're going to see that mentioned a couple different times. And if you're not processing that in a way that you can say, how do I improve this process? How do I improve this experience? How do I make this job the best damn job they've ever had for as long as they're with me? Then you're just leaving that data on the floor. And that's a big mistake. I think people want to feel good. I think people want swag. They want shirts that have our employer's name on them. They want, I don't know, stress balls and all the junk, whatever. But people really don't want that. People really don't. I mean, my kids love that when I bring that stuff home, but that's not how they make an employment decision. They make an employment decision based on how their friends respond to that brand. They make their employment decision based on if their parents or a loyalist that is a fan of that brand has mentioned it before. We use passive eyeballs in a lot of different places to get our message out to that ideal candidate. And it's not just an obvious job posting on a job board.
Yep. And I heard that over and over again when we were talking to the employees, because we'd ask them why they came there. And often it was because they had a true continuous experience. Yes. They went there all the time and they loved the service. Yeah. And then they talked to the manager, and then they started there and they had the same experience as a guest, the same positivity, the same trust, the same relationship with everyone that they had when they were a guest.
Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. The bill of goods that I sell you as a recruiter better be the bill of goods you get when you walk in day one, and should still be the bill of goods that you get on day 90. In fact, we really saw through a restaurant vendor of ours that's close to our heart, People Report, that was giving us data that said it's not about the first 90 days. It's about the first 120 days. For an hourly employee, they tend to fall in love with you and they'll commit to you within 120 days. So within that 120 days, you have one chance, really. You have a couple chances, but you really have one chance to understand what they need from you and be willing to commit to what that looks like. And that is how you start to filter through people who are committed and want to work hard and want to be amazing and want to have amazing experiences for our guests. And that helps, again, with that turnover piece, but it also helps with your referral program, because those people are turning around and saying, this job it's good. It's not easy. Trust me, restaurants are not easy, but it also is worth it. And when you have a friend tell you that it's worth it, they're the best influencer before influencers was cool, that you could ever have.
Exactly. Well, and it gets to that show versus tell, right? We don't have to say we're a highly collaborative team. We could switch it and use your marketing language to say things like, this is a team you can rely on and call on.
Absolutely.
And in restaurant world, you know what that means.
And even if you're not in restaurants, you get what that could mean. You understand it. So I don't try to overspeak to people. I don't try and dumb it down, because I think that ultimately our audiences are stinking smart and they can smell through what I'm trying to, like, if I'm trying to gloss over it and say it's amazing. That's why we say it's not easy. This job is not easy, but this job is worth it. And it's worth your time. The team is worth being a part of because of certain things, whether it be a cultural component, whether it be just they are high volume and they know how to move fast and they get it done and they depend on you to do the same. And you self-select into that if you want that. But we are very blunt with what that job looks like. That's why we wanted to share some of those stories of realistic points of view that said, that same deal. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Right. And I see so many brands take really creative brands and then they start writing their job posting like, I am a team player who is highly skilled, and right. And it's this abrupt moment. You've had this entire experience where you've experienced this brand in one way. And then all of a sudden I'm in, right? I've said, yes, I'll change my whole life for you.
Yes.
I'll apply to this job. Absolutely. And then we switch tones on them. Right. And that's so unnecessary. I know we even with the most technical requirements, and this is one of the sentences I'm most proud of writing in my entire career. We were writing for a busser, right? And there are weight requirements for a busser to work in a restaurant. They have to be able to lift a tray. But because we had that marketing voice and we wanted to bring together reality with the fun, we added a line about you have to be able to carry a 50-pound tray without snagging a fry. Right. And that was actually a story. We heard from someone like, you kept catching this kid stealing French fries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what resonates with people. It also makes people laugh out loud, or just me, but that doesn't matter because I thought it was funny. But we really did get great response from that. People remembered that. People brought it up at the interview. People brought it up to us. People who were brand fans were saying that was really funny. There were a lot of those types of stories that were, again, telling the truth. And I can tell you that I want you to be self-directed and I want you to be, open and flexible to change and all these things. But I gotta kind of tell you what that looks like. And candidly, that then fed off into some of our other recruiting materials, which we were learning how to take some time-lapsing videos of the heart of house, of showing what they actually do, of building out prep videos to show people and to not be ashamed of that, to say, this is what we ask you. Yeah, you're gonna have to cut 1 million mushrooms, but guess what? It's going to be really fun. We're going to be really fast. And it's something that you're going to have amazing knife skills come out of it. For somebody who's a culinarian or an aspiring culinarian, they got to get that experience somewhere. Why not with us? Why not where you're going to be appreciated for it and where it's going to teach you not just life skills, but also skills for your future career. And if that's with us, fantastic. And if it's not, that's okay. I'd rather be an exporter of great talent than to keep it all myself if that's an option. So absolutely. We definitely took that and pivoted right into telling the story in a visual way.
Yep. Well, and these comments, thank you to Richard and Sean for chiming in about the swag, right? I think that's a great example of overselling, right? We oversell, and I'll just say it, shitty jobs, bad jobs.
Absolutely.
Not every job is great for you, but you have to understand that it can be great for them.
Absolutely.
Right. And we dug into the suck too when it comes to the restaurant.
We definitely embrace the suck, because I think if you appreciate that and you say, again, back to the bill of goods, right? I can tell you all day long that this job, I was interviewing for a real estate manager job earlier this week. And I was talking to them about it's not going to be easy because there's a lot of gray here. There's a lot of gray. We have not built out this process. As long as you're comfortable with that, let's keep talking. And I will never want to be accused of, she didn't say that to me, or the job posting wasn't clear enough that I was going to have to kind of build the car as I was driving it. And that's the same idea for this is, yeah, you're going to be in a really hot kitchen. You're going to be in a really cold freezer. You're going to be dealing with hundreds of people coming in your door, pre-COVID, obviously. You're going to be dealing with those people. And there might be some really tough scenarios where you are going to have unhappy guests. Let's talk about that so that you're not surprised about it later, or you don't feel like we did a bait and switch.
Absolutely. And that's another really, really important question we're supposed to be asking up front. What would surprise you about this job? Because I think, right, restaurants, we go into it with so many assumptions. If you've done the job before, if you've worked with someone who does that work, right, you think you know everything, but every restaurant truly is different. Sure. It does have something special that keeps people there.
Absolutely. And I think just being honest about that is one of the ways we differentiate ourselves. So when you were talking earlier about kind of every restaurant company is probably doing something similar, man, the restaurant industry is such a cool industry to be a part of because there really isn't a lot of ego. We share a lot of things. If we are all jumping over the same hurdle, we all try and figure it out together. Competitors are on the phone with each other trying to understand, how we can manage a minimum wage issue or other things that might be affecting a certain city. And so I count myself very lucky to have that network. But I will say that you have to be very careful that you're not looking or showing up in the sea of sameness, if you will, is a quote that we use often. I'd like to be able to stand out and stand out for the right reasons. I don't want to be the most sexy job posting. I'm not sure that phrase has ever been uttered, but I don't want to be the most sexy job posting. I want to be the most accurate and the most interesting to you. And that's okay. If you want to go and apply at Cheesecake Factory, their job postings are very, very different and they're great for them. And so what you have to really do is embrace what your brand looks like, embrace what risks you are willing to take, and kind of challenge your leadership and your operations teams and people to show up in the way that you're promising. Because again, the worst thing in the world is to sell a bill of goods that doesn't get delivered on day 1 or day 90. So everybody's got to be playing ball the same way. And we want to jump out and see of sameness for sure.
Absolutely. The other test, the very bottom line test I'll say is, would you say this out loud without giggling, without smirking, without kind of doing the buzzword bingo, like a highly collaborative team?
Yeah.
Like if you don't feel that need to kind of react to the words, if it feels like something that would flow right out of your mouth, that's the perfect thing to write down.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in our world, it was, ooh, would you say that in front of your mom? I might. Okay, let's go. And so there were some risks for sure. And we probably bombed on a couple of things that weren't really resonating with people, but it's the same thing with marketing, right? You're going to get it right about 90% of the time with the people who are looking for you to guide them in a decision. We are the same way. So I take that information, the data that we get from our marketing partners, I take that and we put that together with our recruiting data. I'm a data geek. I like that number crunching. I like to understand what we're going to do and how we can course correct. And then what we do is we basically say, okay, now let's see how much risk we're willing to take with that. What does that look like? That's 500,000 coasters. That's a big risk. That's a lot of people looking at that thing. Is that the right thing to do? And we're just keeping moving so that we are constantly, again, evolving and asking the right questions for the right audience.
Yep. Well, and the beauty of job postings is that because it's very hard to measure influence without a lot of other influences past that point of apply, you can use marketing metrics to see how they work. So you can do a funnel, visits, opt out. But the beauty here is that opt out is actually a really good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We don't want everyone to apply.
Sure. I think, again, back to marketing tools, at least in my experience and in the restaurant experience, we talk about it a lot, where marketing tools, again, a consumer, a guest, a client, whatever you call them, the person who wants your product or wants your service or wants you, is very similar in a behavioral response as a potential applicant or a parent of a potential applicant or a grandma of a potential applicant or someone who is already a brand loyalist and loves your brand and wants to share it with someone else who may not see your feeds all the time. So if you're talking about just social engagement, you may not get a ton of engagement, but man, if you start to really push through your loyalists, you will get more engagement. And then that will mean, well, I can't calculate that that's going to be a click to apply. If my call to action is click here to apply, that may not get a lot of clicks, but that doesn't depress me. What I see though is that I'm getting a ramp up or an increase in applications through my HRIS or my ATS that I'm seeing. And so I can use some of that information. The other piece is not to be afraid to ask your marketing team to have a kind of some of their territory. For example, we broke into jail with them on the social content calendar. Every single day, if you guys are partnering with your marketing team, you know that your social calendar for your month is packed as a marketer, packed. Usually one message a day, maybe two, but mostly one. I came to them and I asked them for one day a month. And I asked them for the idea to say, can we recognize our team members? Can we tell a story about a team member? Can we have an appreciation day? Can we do what's called Wait Staff Appreciation Day, which is in May? Can we recognize and can we have some engagement with guests to recommend their favorite team member? And we, both the team member and the guests, get a gift card. And we got recognition out of that, really organic recognition. We also got really great engagement. And guess what? Our applications dropped or increased like crazy. It was the most engaged post of that entire year up to that point, which is in August. It was insane. And we kept using that type of resource. CRM, if they're part of a fishbowl, which is a vendor that we've been using, or a CRM process, we actually asked for one day where we could send a note out to certain groups, certain zip codes. We did a couple different criteria, and we used it to ask them to recommend people who might be interested in working for us. That doesn't work for every brand. You're not going to see that necessarily with GE or someone, but you might see that it might start your brain thinking about how you could talk to your clients, your guests, your customers a different way with your recruiting message. And that really has worked for us.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we were able to take that moment, right? Because that came up in our interviews about the job postings as well, and apply it across the candidate experience, across your assessment, to actually make recommendations for the future. And one thing I just want to say before I get too nerdy is that you only have 5 more minutes to ask questions. And so I really want to encourage anyone who's taking on a job post overhaul, anyone who has a lot of high volume, low retention roles, ask questions right now. That was the meat of our project. Yeah. So the first question, do either of we have I don't have a podcast. Do you have a podcast?
No.
I feel like I would watch it.
No.
I do have a blog that's all about writing for recruiting and telling this story. And I think that was honestly, truly my favorite part of working with the Houlihan's brand was the fact that, these job postings are the story of a person. Mm-hmm. And even when we were writing about people that came from all different backgrounds, all different areas, they were lifers, they had just started. There was something really magical about what they all shared.
Sure.
And that is, I think, the most powerful thing about talking to a lot of people and having that access is that when you start to understand them, walk like a duck, talk like a duck, right? And hear their stories. It's fascinating to me how the writing becomes easier, even if you're not a professional writer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, again, kind of pulling this all the way through the employment journey, the conversations that you have with people, having them be a part of the process, man, one, retention play all day long. I want them to feel special. I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel valued for what they're doing. And I can send a thank you note. I love sending thank you notes to anyone I've dealt with, especially my field team. I love sending that. I don't think they get that enough, but I want it to be because I'm appreciative of what they're doing. It's not just the flat out, thanks for being you. It's I want a specific moment where you have added something that our company is now better for. And so when we start to tell those stories, we come back right to those people and we share what that looks like. We make them mini celebrities. They are brand champions for us all over again. And we play that up big time on social. We play that up in the restaurants. We really try and make that work. So yeah, again, back to your current employees are your current recruiters. Man, that's an exercise I will do all day long. It has great ROI.
Exactly. And the way for any of you who are kind of taking on this project or thinking about how to make the most of those relationships, a big part of that is asking people a few different questions. One of my favorites, why do you stay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? You can work anywhere. You're very talented. You're one of the best in this company.
Yes.
Why do you stay?
Yeah. And I was
And
like,
often you can't get a
like,
book.
oh, what is it? What is it saying? What does it say? But it was really awesome. I was really pleasantly surprised. Not that I don't think that our teams are amazing, because they are. And again, I think if you have worked in a restaurant, you have an appreciation for what that means and what people go through in an 8-hour, 10-hour shift, or in a double, whatever you want to do. But I think the idea is that when you see it, because they've given that feedback voluntarily, you know that the work that you're doing is worth it for other people. It's not about me. It's not about my team. It's about the fact that we are continuing to be, again, we want to be the best damn job someone's ever had, whether they're with me at the age of 16 for a year as they go through school, or if they're with me as a career, or they pivot and they surprise themselves and become a lifer, then my job is, we have done the right thing.
Exactly. Well, and I think even more than that is, and this is one of those things that everybody tries to fight in the job posting, right? Is accepting that everyone's a little different.
Yes.
That we might do the same work, but we all need to connect on the value
Absolutely.
of the work and who we want to be.
Right. Sure.
Together.
Yeah. And I think you have to, again, I mean, you can be funny, you can be quirky, you can be sarcastic, but you have to really be honest. It doesn't matter what else, because I think people smell that. I think people understand that. And if you are really struggling with a job and you're like, how honest am I about this job? How honest is the hiring manager willing to be about this job, which is the other part of this conversation, then that's where you'll kind of start to get the magic going, because people do smell that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And using their story is a great way to show versus tell. I can tell you it's a collaborative team all day, but if there's a voice of someone actually telling you who they are, it's great.
Absolutely. Yes, agreed.
And to answer the technical question from Barbara, as far as length, we're talking about story. You really want to target about 250 words for your job posting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to scare most of you. I understand. So 250 words and less than 1/3 job bullets. And the reason that we're targeting that is because we want the minimum qualifications. I cannot emphasize this enough. You don't need to tell everybody everything in the first conversation.
Yeah. That was actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I'm excited to see how you guys work through this later today. That was absolutely, like, we probably were taught, all of us, the ones who were taught, that you had to put everything in there so people could never accuse you that you never told them anything. But the difference between a marketing focused job posting and a job description is very important. And so we talk about it. I don't know if it was you or I that came up with this phrase, but I'll give it to both of us that were both cool enough to think about it. But the idea of it being the thumb stopper. So when you're on social and you're scrolling, all of a sudden you hit that thumb and you're, oh wait, I want to go back. I want thumb stopper content. So I don't want the whole thing. I don't necessarily need all of that information. I provide it absolutely in the posting later. I provide it on the career site later. But if I'm looking at a way to get people's attention quickly, I'm going to look at a marketing focus, not marketing in a department, marketing as in big, interesting, short, and with some content that makes me go, what? I want to see more of that, or a visual that makes me say, that person looks like somebody that I would probably want to spend majority of my life with if we do it work, right? Or something like that is relevant to them. And that is the biggest hurdle for a lot of people, is flipping their brains over from full-on job description that you can feel really good about from a legal perspective to the one that you actually can do from a marketing focused perspective. And that was really helpful when you kind of use that, because it gave me permission to say the things we wanted to say, and then all the other stuff that's important. And I think people are smart enough to realize there's more to the job than just these 3 bullets. But I think it really does give people a teaser and an excitement and want to know more. And you always want people to be crave worthy of your brand. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's the evolution. I think that's one of the attraction points. And what we're going to talk about next is job titles. And job titles are one of those things that kick people out instantly, right? You will not click on an ad for a job that is nowhere near related to your career or anything else in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly why Dave wants me to go from this conversation into our next conversation all about job titles. And I believe we are rounding right up on time. So I just want to take a minute before Dave starts his round. Thank you so much. I get to say it first.
That was a dead on impression. I'm so impressed.
I'm just so grateful that you took the time out of your day to come here and share your experience with everyone, because I can teach them how to write job postings all day,
Sure.
but we all know we run into things in real life, and I just appreciate your perspective so much.
Absolutely. Well, you have taught me a ton, and I'm a better person because I know you, and I'm excited to see what you do next.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
See y'all.
All right.